Hi everyone. Hi. You're welcome to this space. Thank you for joining us. My name my name is Yiga and I'm here today with amazing Africans that attended the United Nations Open Source Week. And I'm privileged to share their stories, their experiences, and share with all of us, right? And it's one of the things that really fuels me, bringing this kind of conversations with beautiful people making real impact in the communities that they belong to. And today I'll be speaking to no, four. I remove myself because I won't be speaking a lot. I'm the host. Four phenomenal African leaders who attended the United Nations Open Source Week in 2024 and 2025. So it's like double combo. And we're not just going to talk about open source, we're going to talk about what it means for Africa, about our representation on that global stage, and how we can turn these discussions that they had into tangible change back at home. So let's meet our amazing guests. I'll introduce them and, we'll go up. The first person is Abigail Mesrenyame Dobe. I hope I got it correctly. She's smiling. Quick one. I had to go search on YouTube for your Python um, community interview and learn how to pronounce your name. So yes, hi Abigail. Abigail is an open source researcher. She's a community builder and programs manager from Ghana. And she loves the power that open source can put in people's hands. And she wants to help create more awareness through community building, advocacy, and research. She's currently in her fourth year of graduate school, conducting research as part of the University of Cincinnati School of IT program. Hi, Abigail. Hi, you're welcome. The next person we have here is Feven Mekonenn. I hope I got it correctly. Also, Feven is the founder of Open Web Culture, a research studio dedicated to examining how new technologies shape culture, economy, autonomy, and stewardship. Can you hear everything? And she's also part of the team at Komorebi Fund, which invests in women building in the crypto/decentralized technology space. Welcome, Feven.
Hi, lovely to be here.
Hi. The next person on our list is Obaloluwa Ajiboye. Oba is a lot of things. Obaloluwa Ajiboye is an innovation manager with over 6 years of experience leading and contributing to major digital transformation initiatives within the public sector, including roles with the Chief Digital Office of UNDP and the African Union Commission, and now UNICEF. Look at the profile of the people we have here. Awesome. Throughout his career, Oba has dedicated himself to leveraging technology to enhance governance and public service delivery. His expertise spans building innovation ecosystems, strengthening strengthening tech communities, supporting the growth of startups, and implementing scalable solutions across multiple countries. At UNDP, he co-led the Open Source Ecosystem Enabler (OC) initiative in partnership with ITU, which has been pivotal in advancing digital governance frameworks and helping nations adopt open, interoperable digital tools. Oh my God. Oba, please say hi to us. Hi, Oba.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here and looking forward to share my experience and looking forward to also learn from my fellow speakers. Thank you, Yiga.
Awesome. And the last but not the least person we have here is Ruth Ikegah. Yo, you guys, I call her Big Ruth. That's how I call Ruth, and I hope that name sticks. Ruth is an open source program manager, GitHub star, a community leader. She's passionate about building inclusive and sustainable tech ecosystems across Africa. Ruth originally trained as a microbiologist before transitioning into tech, and she discovered her purpose in connecting people, tools, and opportunities through open source. Ruth's profile, she's led so many, multiple global open source initiatives, including serving as a community lead at Chaos Africa and collaborating with organizations to advance diversity, equity, and accessibility in technology. She's a recognized speaker and mentor who uses her platform to empower new contributors, especially women and young Africans. So, let's say hello to Ruth. Hi, Ruth. Hi, Ruth. Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi everyone. It's nice to be here.
Awesome. Awesome. So we apologize. Ruth is actually not feeling too well, but we're thankful to her that she made this space. And for Oba, he has technical glitches, so we can't see his face. But yes, we can hear his voice. We can hear both their voices, and that's enough, right? So, to everyone, welcome everybody again, and we'll just get right into it, right? Personally, having represented Africa at global stages myself, I know that in rooms like this, it's often the unscripted moments that carry the most weight, right? And that means these are the conversations where we all feel seen, we all feel heard, and we get challenged to think bigger for the African ecosystem because we understand what Africa feels like. We understand, the pain of the people back at home. So my question for everyone here is, the UN Open Source Week was packed with big themes, amazing themes like openness, inclusion, global cooperation, you know. But beyond the agenda, what was one moment, one conversation, or an insight that personally resonated with you as an African professional in that space? And I'd like to start with the 2024 attendees first. Right. What was your biggest highlight or lesson from your experience last year? So I'll go with Oba first, please.
Okay. So beyond the whole professional settings and getting to New York and all that, I think the major highlights for me was uh being present physically at the UNHQ. And I could remember getting my access card. And at that particular time, I was with UNDP as a staff. So, as a home based staff, actually. So, getting my ID card, and I could remember texting someone and just be like, okay, I did not see this coming. So I think that's the major highlight for me. And professionally, I think is the fact that I got to meet a couple of, not even a couple of major people that have been a key player in the space for the longest, right? Uh, People from Red Hat, people from ITU, and of course, my former organization, UNDP. So, yeah. Your mic is muted, Yiga.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. I was just saying thank you for sharing that. I believe it's a surreal feeling, seeing that tag. You're like, oh, we did this, right? Over to Ruth. Hi, Ruth.
Hi. So for me, right, I think before attending the conference, I was just very. I had not seen, like, I knew about the UN agencies, right? I knew about some of the work that they were doing, and I had not really connected the dots on, like, because the UN agency hosting the UN Open Source Conference is the technology team, right? The emerging technology team within the UN, right? So I had not really pictured that particular team as part of the UN. I had not heard of them before. So, and then even not just about tech, they were hosting an open source conference. And I think the one last year was the second one. I think there was a second one. They had one prior the previous year, which they even acknowledged that it was a very smaller group, just few people that were in attendance. for the first edition, right? So it was just so interesting seeing how how the UN agent, that particular group was putting things together, and they cared about open source technology, and they were trying, I think they were doing a lot of efforts then to foster open source in to foster open source in within the different UN agencies, and even like open source a lot of things that they were doing. So it was just so interesting to learn that particular thing, and also just the fact that people from states that were attending that meeting, but it was also people from like the open source ecosystem, right? So I was also able to like meet other people that I had been working with or collaborating with. So it was just very interesting. And I think, yeah, there were some, I think Opa and I were the only Nigerians, if I'm not mistaken. Um, I think maybe there were, I don't know, maybe Oba can confirm as well. But like it was really quite they were out there. I think there were a couple of Africans, right? Some people from Kenya um as well. But yeah, it was just so interesting to see that kind of conversation happening, at the UN. So yeah, I think that was the highlight for me.
Yes. Um, okay, I was just checking. I was unmuted. Thank you, Ruth. I totally agree with that. I can imagine what it would have felt like just two Nigerians, at that time. That's so amazing. And interesting factor was seeing Ruth, and this is what we talk about when we say representation, right? Seeing Ruth go for that made me, apply for 2025, right? So, and it's just that's what representation does for us. So yes, that's amazing. Over to the 2025 attendees, Feven and Abigail. What moments or sessions stood out the most for you in 2025? I'll go with Feven first.
That's a great question. I think for me, there was a session on like DPI and the global south, and it was mainly about like digital infrastructure violence and how digital authoritarianism, I'm mispronouncing that, can like lead to digital violence and can revoke like individuals' internet freedom. And so, like as we just saw in Nepal and like different countries in Africa, like Ethiopia, my own country, where governments have full control and access to like your connectivity, like your internet access, and people's ability to communicate with each other, right? And so, how how can that affect people's like freedom of speech and their overall freedom? And when people don't feel like they have like freedom in any sort of way, that can cause a co-op, and that can cause, you know, rebels, and that can cause like people can rebel, and they'll look for alternative segues and ways to receive what they need when they can't get it from their governments, right? And as we saw in Nepal, that meant literally like what just happened in Nepal, like where a lot of youth were just like overthrew the government, right? And so that was like a very interesting session to me, because it was like, this technology is so powerful, and it's also it's like it democratizes a lot of things that a lot of people from the global north take for granted.
Yes, yes. I totally agree with you. But yeah, let's go with Abigail. Thank you so much, Feven. Abigail, you're next.
Yeah. So thank you for putting this together. It was such a great and interesting experience for me this year. Um, and reflecting even on my journey and how far I've come, right? I heard about the UN Open Source Week, like from the very first session that happened. I heard about it, and unfortunately, I couldn't make it that year. It didn't happen for me as well in 2024, but I'm grateful that I could attend in 2025. So the first thing for me is like getting to meet like all of these people who are behind making things happen, not just the UN Open Source Week, but then other open source projects, open source communities, like getting to meet all of these like amazing people was like the major highlight for me. Like I've been working and interacting with Ruth Ikegah for so long, and I got to meet her for the first time at the UN HQ, and it was so cool, right? And we actually both gave a talk talking about open source in Africa and all, and that was like a great experience, and pretty much seeing multiple Africans take on different roles. Ruth and a couple of other people were moderators for multiple sessions. It was really cool to see that we had just like we had come not only to be there to listen and connect with people, but we also participated in multiple ways. And for me, that was like really huge and great. And one of the sessions that stood out, or some of the like one of the conversations that also stood out, was learning about the fact that Kenya was starting to adopt open source in terms of like their government, right? They were starting out their own OSPO, and for me, it was like really great to even learn about it, like how the government and then private institutions are coming together to actually build systems and all. So personally, like as an African being in this space, it was amazing meeting the people and learning about all the amazing things that are coming out of our continent. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Abigail and Feven. I think it's the same voice across board. We were happy to be there, and not just be there, take these lessons back, and also be productive in the event as well, not just as listeners. So yes, and next, Abigail, I'm going to come back to you almost immediately. You're consistently building bridges with communities. I think one of the beautiful things I saw with you was trying to get books, Python books, to students in Africa. It was not just Ghana, and that was such a beautiful thing. By the way, she has a beautiful YouTube channel. You guys should go check her out. And she leads Mesrenyame and Friends. Did I get that correctly?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so I'm trying. I say that to say that you're consistently building communities, building bridges, and with your that deeply resonates with me as a mentor as well. So I'd like to say that from your perspective, what is the biggest barrier preventing that intelligence, that brilliant computer science students in Accra or Nairobi or Kigali or Ethiopia, you know, from meaningfully contributing to major global open source projects? And what's the one practical thing that the global community can do to tear that barrier down?
Hmm.
Over to you, Abigail. I know it's a lot. You can handle it.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm going to be brief about it. And yeah, and then hopefully we can also get Ruth to chip in and also listen to her side as well in her session. So yeah, it's been great, especially looking at my experience, my personal experience, starting out as a computer science and engineering student who never really liked computers and what I studied in school, but how much open source has helped me find purpose. And every day I wish that students could or would learn about open source whilst they are in school, right? And this, in its sense, also gets me to realize how much it's of a huge barrier it is for students to actually learn about how they can contribute to open source, right? Um, there's an issue of lack of resources, and lack of resources comes in multiple ways. I can talk about resources in terms of books or like knowledge, right? Which is also one of the things that inspires me to take out like or ship some books like back home to folks who need them. Um, Even though like we have, I mean, multiple courseworks and all, like in our school curriculum and all of that. Um, we are able to learn stuff, right? But unfortunately, we do not have a course curriculum that really integrates how students can learn about how to contribute to open source, which is why myself and definitely can speak for the work that Ruth does, right? We always try to target folks who are starting out because sometimes that can be difficult to navigate. People have the skills, so they're able to learn multiple programming languages, design concepts. They're able to do all of that, but unfortunately, the resources and mentorship for them to translate those skills or bring those skills into open source actually is lacking, right? Um, it's the reason why communities like Pi Ladies Ghana, Oscar, the Ubuntu community is the reason why these communities also exist. That way, we can keep training more students, more youngsters to be able to learn about how they can contribute to open source. And aside from the knowledge gap, that in terms of like other resources, right? There's people have to navigate trying to get into access to the internet. We are talking about how these students can actually make meaningful open source contributions and connect with people globally. Now, that is the work of the internet, right? To help us connect with people globally, people all over like the world, right? And imagine if people don't even have access to that, right? Or that is easily like a huge barrier when it comes to how much students have to navigate contributing to open source and connecting with other people globally, like through open source. So these are some of the gaps that I can share. And most definitely, how can we be better? How can we ensure that um, we are bringing more of these youngsters into open source and helping them connect globally, right? Is to make sure that we are providing more resources, we are training more people, and then also making open source contributions like easily accessible, right? We talk about the different ways of contributing to open source, like other than code. There's design, there's translation, making these pathways like easy and helping them to understand that you can come into open source with the skills that like you have, I think would really go a long way to actually bring more of these like students and the youth or young people into the world of open source. Yeah. Yiga, are you there?
I'm here. I'm right here. Okay. Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm new to this, so pardon me. Um, Thank you so much. That was a lot of things. You tried to compress, everything into a very short, delivery, and it was amazing. Thank you so much for your perspective. I think the next person I want to go to is Oba. I call him Oba, yes, but Obaloluwa, right? Oba, through your work, you've been at the heart of digital transformation from the African Union to UNICEF, and you're big on DPI, right? So, with your unique lens of building innovation ecosystems across the continent, I think I'm very curious about the events that feature the hackathon during the Open Source Week, right? what does it take to move these events from ideas, hackathon ideas, and prototypes on a global stage like the United Nations to a scalable solution that actually improves public service delivery here in Africa, right? Because having a seat at that table, the table at the UN, is one thing, but how do we ensure that those solutions that are co-created in these spaces genuinely reflect the specific infrastructural and cultural context of the various African nations? Over to you.
Um, hmm. Okay, so I would answer this question based using my own personal experience, and uh, the question is even similar to a couple of things I'm working on right now, which is like around scaling innovations, innovative solutions, right? So now, the thing is, the localization is mostly important, right? What works in Kigali will definitely not work in Kano, or might not even work in, say, Kampala, right? So not doing that replication of, uh oh, okay, these people did this, we should be able to do it too. No, what is the do it on a smaller scale. Okay, what is going to happen if we do this? Let's try this way. This is what our people like. This is what they are interested in. Let's try it this way and see if it will work. If it works, then you move to scaling, right? And another thing is this ecosystem support, right? When you start, when you do everything, um, all the applause and everything fades, right? Then the real question comes: who owns this product? Who owns this project? Who is maintaining it? And what's the long-term goal, right? And this is where partnership comes in, and this is one of the reasons why I love open source, right? The collaboration. uh, I do say something which is, no man is, not that I do say something, it's something that everybody knows. No man is an island, right? You definitely have to work together. And like I said, it's one of the reasons why I love open source. You meet people, you have conversations, interesting conversations, share ideas, and before you know it, um, the what you're trying to you wouldn't even know that somebody else might just be talking about a particular solution to a particular problem. It happened this last time when a couple of people, not a couple of, but major key players and uh, innovators were in Lagos for the Oscar Fest, right? And I was having conversation with someone, and I even had to I had to make a tweet that it's a particular thing and ideas just flow. So what I'm trying to say is collaboration is the main end goal. And I hope I have not drifted away from your questions and I've been blabbing, but please, so I'm going to shut up now.
Okay. Thank you so much, Oba. You were not blabbing, right? Because African governments, we need to collaborate more. There's usually a big divide between. So I think that not I think, I do know that in Africa, when you see people that work in the public sector and when you see people that work in the private sector, you can tell the difference. It's like night and day, right? Because the way that they work, the systems and everything. So yes, the public sector needs to collaborate more. See collaboration. It's for me, I would say in short, it's collaboration over competition, right? And that's a culture that African governments need to imbibe some more. So thank you very much for that insightful conversation and perspective. Hi Ruth, I'm going to take Ruth next. Um, so, Big Ruth, as I call her, she's a community builder herself. I mean, I won't say so much about it, but you can just Google her. Um, I know that true inclusion requires intentional design. It's what separates healthy communities from unhealthy communities, right? And it's at the heartbeat of what we do at Chaos, right? So as the community lead at Chaos Africa, as a GitHub star, program manager, I think that you've had, and of course, in your most recent article as well, you gave a beautiful overview of the United Nations Open Source Week. You talked about the role of open source program offices, OSPOs. So I'd like to ask, beyond just facilitating collaboration, how can OSPOs, especially the ones based in Africa, we heard from Abigail saying that we now have an OSPO office in Kenya that is just starting up. So how can offices like that would spring up now and in the future, actively measure and champion the health of our local open source ecosystems, focusing on sustainability beyond just external funding? Because like we know it, open source is not paid, right? Nobody is paying us for this work that we do. So as a leader in diversity, equity, and inclusion, what does representation truly mean in practice for an African contributor in the open source space? Over to you, Ruth.
Okay. So yeah, I think for this question, I was going to mention the fact that I think one of the big news from this year's conference was that Kenya now has, their own OSPO, their own open source program office. I think it's situated under the government of Kenya, right? Which is a very good and progressive thing, because originally open source program offices, they were mostly things that proprietary companies kind of set up from time being to engage with the open source community, and also kind of manage their open source dependencies, things like that, right? So, and now we have seen, that being adopted by like the public sector, governments trying to like adopt these things. And it's just so important because, again, the government, they're the people that have the resources that, they have a lot of resources, right, to solve the problems that we usually encounter. So in terms of like, just because this is just an African space, we're here talking about how we can promote open source more in our like in our continent, right? So I think one of the big things is being closer to the community, like those groups that are doing the work already. So it's not like open source is a new thing here in Africa. There are groups, communities, Python user groups. A lot of them are doing like really lovely work with bringing people together. They've done a lot of advocacy. So I think one of the most important parts, especially in terms when you talk about sustainability, is to begin to connect with those groups that are doing the work, and also empowering them to build projects, right? So we should kind of move away from just depending on Western projects. Like, how do we build our community to build those projects as well, giving them the resources, connecting with them, participating in the community? Because even with OSPOs in like the global north and everything, a lot of times some communities will complain that the company just comes, takes over tries to take over everything, tries to decide, because they are participating in the project in some capacity, right? It's that issue is always there. But like learning from that, I think this open source program office should be more closer to the communities that are like the youths. Like there's a lot of work with like youth engagement in open source that can just help us innovate better and be more creative. So I think that's the big one for me. Like the people like this newly formed hospitals working with communities, engaging like young people to build and innovate, right? Like most of the time, this the main strategy is how can we, like for example, for the hospitals, how can we promote the use of open source in our organization, or for example with Kenyan government in Kenya, or the government, And sometimes it's either what are those tools that they're using. So they could also empower you to like build those projects, engage them, build like that pipeline for people to innovate, give them those resources. Also, it connects to like employment as well. Bringing like that talent pipeline into like the work that is happening. So yes, I think that's the big thing there is engaging with the communities that are already doing the work and supporting that work beyond, like you said, beyond money.
Yes, thank you so much, Ruth. It reminds me of that quote, with PWDs when we're working with people living with disabilities. It's nothing about us without us. So, of course, when you're trying to build for certain kinds of people, or a community, you need to involve them because there's cultural differences, there's a whole lot of things. And yes, I totally agree with that. Thank you so much. Over to you, Feven. So, um, Feven, coming from your very creative background, and I'm a creative as well, so I deeply believe that technology should serve our culture, not the other way around. It should serve our creativity. We should use technology creatively, right? Um, and also, I love the name of your research studio, Open Web Culture, because it immediately connects technology to people, right? Open web and then the culture, just like what Ruth spoke about in communities, right? And you examine how tech shapes culture and how tech shapes economies. And during DPI Day, they discussed open source in public ecosystems. Sorry, open source in public systems. How can an open source approach to digital public infrastructure do more than just deliver efficient services, right? How can it actually foster a sense of local stewardship and strengthen African cultural and economic autonomy? So your work with Komorebi Fund as well focuses on investing in women builders, right? How does funding women in tech specifically change the kind of digital infrastructure and open source tools that get built for Africa?
Okay, great questions. I guess I can address the second question first about
Yeah.
Komorebi. So, like first thing, like open source is like beyond geography, and mainly when we invest in women builders at the earliest stage of their companies, it's because they have a very visionary idea of how to transform the world or the market or otherwise through like digital infrastructure or crypto or blockchain technology. And then that could be like examples of like how can we crowdfund um, like sources of capital so that we can build things in Africa that would have otherwise not been able to get resource because of banks or governments or other barriers that might not assist African entrepreneurs in their local currencies or their respective countries. And then another could be like, how are people building connectivity? So it's like when we invest, we're like, are these companies really serving the entire world, right? And how can these companies or technologies, because they're inherently open source, they are inherently global as well. And then for the first question as well, we always, like in the decentralized technology space, we always have to remember that open source technology is often interoperable with other technologies, um, and can be like stacked on top of each other. And then a lot of people or anyone can, like the whole point is anyone can build on top of it, anyone can fork it, anyone can build their own version of it. And that is what contributes to sovereignty and like the resilience and economic autonomy, because you can look at the infrastructure that's been already built and size it to whatever that you need it to. And then let's see. I guess also I wanted to say like Africa is a really large continent with like local systems and beliefs and like cultural identity, and each region, deserves to co-create what their own governance system or own DPI system needs, so that their citizens can also receive those benefits, in a way that suits their cultural needs and their cultural practices. So it's like, not one size fits all, which is why open source is so beneficial, because you can right size it to whatever ecosystem that it's currently in, I guess, if that makes sense.
Okay, so absolutely. Thank you so much for that beautiful insight. Um, everything I believe that everything is just in sync, and people might need to come back here, watch, especially for people beginners and people that were not able to make it to the event. um I think that the next thing I wanted us to talk about is for us to discuss, bridging barriers to global participation, right? And that's so important to me because I was invited to this event, but I couldn't attend in person because I wasn't able to secure a date at the United States Embassy in Nigeria. So that's so sad because it means that we're missing out on global conversations as leaders in the tech industry. So you can imagine doing all of this work, and the United Nations says, hey, you're fit to come to this event, but you can't even see a date. So it doesn't just affect individuals, it also affects people whose perspectives get built into global data and policy framework. So, for example, Ruth mentioned that in 2024, it was just herself and Oba. There were the two Nigerians there, and a few other Africans, right? So I know that many young Africans and emerging leaders face similar barriers when invited to global policy conversations. So, I guess the question for all of us is what policy or diplomatic frameworks can African governments negotiate to ensure access for their citizens to global technology and policy spaces? I mean, the United Nations does various things, so it's not just in the tech space. There's times when they're holding programs for women, there's times when they're holding programs for climate change. And what what can the government and policy makers do when their citizens are invited for research, leadership, or fellowship opportunities, beyond the United Nations, right? So that qualified voices from the global south are not excluded from shaping, global conversations and tech governance conversations. So I'd like to take Ruth Ikegah first for that. Hi, Ruth.
Hi, it's a very deep question because again, like I'm not really a policy expert, but I think I can add in some things from like my perspective, right? And they're usually, I think this is one of the big questions I usually ask, right? Like why can't things just be smooth? Like you're going for a UN conference, right? Why can't you just, get a date, get interviewed and just move along with it, right? It's first I think that and then there's the passports, depending on what country passport you have, there are a lot of limitations with that. And the first one is I think that some of these events, the planning of these events usually happen at least, I think, even up to like 8 months, more than that, like, so and depending on when the event is happening, I think one of the important things is the conference itself, making that extra step to ensure that people's like different voices are heard, like different people are able to participate. This year, I think this year we had a very good, like at least compared to like other years, we even had like the minister of communications from Nigeria also participate. A couple of Nigerians that I saw as well, and a couple of other African people. There were more people, because again, why that happened is because people talked about the second edition. It was like, attendees talked about it, and other people were interested to, try to apply, try to attend, or try to be part of that conversation. But imagine if this is coming from, like, these governments or these initiatives that are, and this is not me saying that they don't actually do that, but I think they have more power and more leverage to actually make those invitations more intentional, liaising with like the government of like those particular countries. There are also youth initiatives that are already existing in some of these member state countries already, so engaging them in those like conversations early enough. And sometimes this visa approvals, things like getting like they sometimes they just go beyond particular policies in a particular country, so it's quite complicated to but I know like having those conversations early enough just help with ensuring that these people are able to like facilitate, like helping with the visa processes as well, because one of the very difficult things with the US visa is getting an appointment date. Is so like the timing for it is so like, even for me personally, I think I had to write like an emergency letter so that I get notice, and that's not everybody, like it doesn't get, not like it's certain that it gets approved for everybody, right? So having the government really, because then it's about intentionality. Like if they find ways to make the process easier, find ways to like create diplomatic connections, to make, because again, the conversations are important, and it's important that young people are there. It's important that people are represented. So having those like working in hand with the government, trying to help people get, dates, things like that, I think it would help. But I think at the center of it, without knowing about like not deep in policy, I think the government, like for the member states, have a role to play in ensuring that the youth, if they are aware of these opportunities. This event is free. I didn't have to pay money to attend the event, right? So ensuring that like that opportunity is spread across, and that people are, it's not also just about participating, like funding to participate in events like this. They're usually not a lot of them are usually not funded. Personally, I think I wrote it in the article I wrote. I had to like pay sponsor myself to be there. There are people that actually cannot maybe afford to do that sponsorship. So providing like support for things like engaging conversations like this. Imagine having to, like, for people that are interested, you can engage your government, engage like, have that connection to be able to get support to attend events and conversations like this. Because again, like those, your voices, like the voices are important, like having those perspectives matter. Like even though the person is not actually speaking, like being part of that conversation, the knowledge that you get to gain, the people you get to interact with, it goes down, and it helps a lot. So I think, yeah, those are things I like to add. But like, I think the question is very, very very, very deep. So yes.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Ruth. And these are the. I love the fact that we came together to do this, because on my end, Ruth just brought in another narratives to say, hey, it's not just the governments, also these programs, the United Nations, the member states as well. There needs to be that synergy, right? Between the both parties, and there needs to be that support. If you think that this voice is valuable enough for your program, right, and they got an invite, why not put it in the planning process to take it a step further to ensure that they can make it and their presence can be felt. So thank you so much, Ruth. I would like for Oba to speak next on this. Hi, Oba.
Hi, hi. So I think I'll need your help on helping with the question again, please.
Oh, okay. So we were talking about bridging barriers to global participation, and the question is, what policy or diplomatic frameworks can African governments negotiate to ensure easier access for their citizens to global technology and policy spaces? I give an example of the fact that I got the United Nations invite to New York, but I wasn't able to make it physically because I could not get a date. Right, I couldn't even get a date at the embassy in Nigeria. So we're asking, what can the government do? Right, what can we do?
Okay. Um, hmm. um, I think it will take a while before we get there. Um, Considering the fact that even the governments themselves, they're just getting, let's say, open or getting used to the fact that open source has been here, not is coming. Open source has been here, and it's not going anywhere, and it's also here to help. Right now, I will use an example of the OSPO in Kenya. I remember when we were working on it then under the OC project then, and we were considering countries. Um, we we had to one of the criteria, one of the things that I would say was a factor was the openness, the willingness, the something like that, right? So imagine we already have an OSPO in Kenya. If something is happening in Kenya now that has to do with open source or a kind of imagine, maybe I'm speaking it to existence, but imagine Oscar in Kenya, uh, and uh, imagine the kind of ties with the OSPO and how visa won't be an issue, right? So, like I said, it's a gradual process. We will get there. We are already on the path, and I honestly understand what Ruth mentioned, especially regarding the visa and all that. She answered or spoke to most of the points. But what I'm going to come in from is we're actually on our way already, and it's good we already have one in the government and in Africa and is in Kenya. Hopefully another one pops up. Who knows? Maybe next year, yeah, next year, maybe before the end of this year, and we have a strong voice. So yeah, we are on our way there.
Thank you, Oba, for advocating for us and giving us that hope. Feven, what do you have to say about that in the future?
I think that's a great question. And I think sometimes the responsibility is on these global organizations, right? They have satellite offices in Africa. Like the UN has a satellite um, headquarters in Nairobi and I think in Lagos and in Ethiopia as well. And so um, it's also, if they're intentional about like their SDGs and, global cooperation and, all these things that they mention over and over again, then it should be vital that they host events and conferences at places where it is like equitable to go to, right? Whether it's through live streams, right? Or whether it's like in Africa or in any other place that is easier to like easier to get to than the United States that might have a lot of restrictions that can't easily be like overturned or otherwise. And so yeah, a lot of the responsibility has to be on these global organizations as well because they have the funding and because they plan these events and conferences out like what 8 to a year in advance, then they surely can make do with another place, another location, even once, or maybe a satellite event in Nairobi 6 months after the open source conference in New York as a check-in, right? Like there are a lot of options here, and so that responsibility also needs to lie on them.
Hmm. Again, this is why these conversations are important because talking with the three of you, there's been, different points, different perspectives. And I totally agree with that because it goes back to, what we said in the beginning, nothing about us without us, right? So essentially bringing the conference home to the communities that you're trying to help, the communities you're trying to talk about the most when it comes to, sustainable development goals. And it's so important. I feel like they should hear that part of the conversation and, implement it, maybe put it in future plans, right? So thank you so much, Feven and Obaloluwa. We're short of time, so there's one more question on data, but I don't think we'll be able to cover it because I like to respect people's time. But so two things. I have one more question for Oba, and then we close, right? So earlier when Feather was talking, Feather's question was on DPI, digital public infrastructure, and Oba has done a lot of work in that space. He's passionate about it. So for me, I saw Oba give an amazing talk at Oscar Fest that focused on DPIs, right? And so, Oba, I want to ask you from your perspective at the United Nations Open Source Week 2024, what role should African governments and communities play in co-creating open, citizen-driven digital infrastructure? Over to you, Oba.
Okay. Thank you, Yiga. Actually, it's been a long hour of you moderating and talking. Thank you so much, and thank you for the question. So, to be honest, one thing I would say about DPI, and coming from the point of how much I love or I'm passionate about it, is the fact that it's the governance and the people, right? Uh, to answer your question, I think we need to set a framework where we have open standard, interoperability, and trust, which is something that is very, very can be difficult, especially in our uh, side of uh, side of the world, right? But how do we, beat this? That's why we have communities, right? Let's continue to co-create the system and let it be uh, truly driven by the citizen, right? And an example is some of the things I'm working on right now, which I might not be able to talk in detail about, but I've seen local developers, civil society, and even government design stuff together, and it's something that the people can use, right? So to answer your question, we need a framework. We need something to guide us, and we need to play by it and stick to it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oba. Okay, so the final thing I want to ask is, I want us to give a word of advice and something for Africans that would watch this, in the future, something for them to look forward to. Because I always tell young people that every expert was once a beginner who decided to start, right? So I think that so many people will look at us right now, look at all our achievements, and be like, where do I even start from, right? So I want us, each and every one of us, and I will speak to it as well. Um, I want us to speak directly to young Africans watching us. What's that one piece of advice that we would give to someone living in Africa, or even if they're not living in Africa, someone, just an African, right? In Kigali, Ghana, in Europe, wherever, who is curious about open source but doesn't know where to start. And if you could describe the future of African open source in one word, what would it be? Over to you, Feven.
Okay, I think that's a really great question. One word, I'll tackle that first. I would say like democratize, like open source really democratizes knowledge and information sharing and all that good stuff. And then I would also say, like, back to your first question, there's a lot of information that's out there. And as Africans, like, our perspectives are very unique. And I think open source and agency as like concepts are very intertwined and they empower each other. And so, like, open source can empower you to like to get more things done, to like write online, to like learn whatever software development languages that you want, and actually contribute to what you think can empower others or yourself. And so if there is like if you're not in like the open source space, that's totally okay, because there's so much information that's out there, and it's just a tool to empower your empower yourself, and also you just have agency over your life, and yeah.
Thank you so much, Feven. Can you hear me? Okay. I think I still can. So thank you so much, Feven. That was amazing. Agency is so important, and that's something that open source gives to us as beginners, as Africans. Hi, Oba. Over to you. What do you have to say?
Um, so I'm going to come again and say, please help me with the question again.
So just in case you're watching this and you're wondering, right, it's raining and our network is part of the problems of living in Africa. Our network is a bit bad, and that's why Oba is having these issues. So yes, Oba, it's a word of advice and something to look forward to. Um, I'm asking, what is the one thing that you would tell an African that is watching this in 5 years' time, in 6 years' time, right? Tomorrow, right? What's that one piece of advice that you give to them with all of the problems that may pop up, knowing what Africa feels like? Um, who is curious about open source but doesn't know where to start? They look at us and they feel like, oh, how do we even get to where these people are, right? And then the second question is, how would you describe the future of African open source in one word? What's that one word you would use? So,
I'll start with number two. I would say strong, to be honest. I've been in rooms or I've been engaged in conversations where Africa, the continent Africa comes up, and they're like, oh, like they want to know more. They can already hear what we've been doing and can't even wait to collaborate. So, strong. Then for number one question, which is about how to start. To be honest, it still goes back to working with people, join a community, search for anyone that is close by. If you don't have anyone close by physically, there's a lot online. And you would join, you would learn, ask questions. I know people say stuff about the bad side of X, formerly Twitter, but I promise you, it's still like one of my most used favorite app, because there's what are you looking for? I just make a tweet, somebody that will see it and probably help you if you're looking for anything. Like, so just be vocal and join communities, and yeah, get this rolling.
thank you so much, Oba. That's so interesting. When I heard strong, I'm like, yeah, good, amazing. So for me, closing out, I think the one thing that I would say is start where you are, right? The cost of entry is embarrassment, as they usually say, right? So you have to go for that one thing that you want. You also have to realize that to get to the next level, you have to be a beginner, on the ladder of things. And get a mentor, right? Speak to people. Nobody bites. And I think one of the beautiful things I love about the open source space is that it's a warm space, right? You would see this person high up there and you just message them and they're like, oh, hey, hey, hi. And they're really happy to help you, right? And in the community chat, send a message, look out for them, and be, like Oba said, be vocal about what you want. Go into these communities that you want to join, say something, talk about, use the general, introduce yourself, and say what you'd like to do, where you're at, and then somebody welcomes you, right? So if you're watching this in the future, I want to also say to you that as Africans, we also have to grow from the point where we're just end users and become actual producers of things. So we're actual builders, right? So I want to see an Africa where we learn all of these skills, we get all of these skill sets, and we use it to improve our situation, because we're the ones that know where the shoe parts, right? And we're the ones that know the best possible ways to solve this problem. So I want to see builders from Africa, building not just for Africa, but for the world as well. And with that, I'd like to say you're unstoppable. I think that the future of African open source is unstoppable. And there's no limit to what we can achieve, right? And so we're 6 minutes past the hour. Thank you so much to all of our brilliant guests. You can see all the wisdom popping out here and there. Thank you so much to Abigail for her time. Thank you to Ruth. Ruth was not feeling fine; she had to make it. Abigail had this time was not convenient for her, but she really just had to make it. So that shows how much each person is invested in making this work. Oba as well, thank you so much. Feven, it's my first time speaking with you. Thank you so much for making this. Your insights were so profound. Personally, I have to go and watch this video again because I'm sure I must have missed a lot of things, right? And you're all living proof of the intelligence and the creativity that Africa brings to the global tech stage. And this conversation is essentially, conversations like this is why I created this space for us to ensure that, beyond getting into these rooms and leading these discussions, we're also carrying more people along with us, right? And bringing more people, let them see us the way that we are. So it's about people's futures, and I'm happy to have you lead by example. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for. Yeah, bye, Oba. Bye, Oba. Bye, Feven. Yep. I need to end this.